Hi, good morning. My name is Dr. Sharon Carano, and I am here today to present to you some tips and techniques on how to teach children with autism how to ride conventional bikes. I used to work for a nonprofit here in the States where we use modified equipment to transition kids and adults to conventional bicycles. And so some of what I'm going to present to you today are just some things that I learned along the way, and how you might be able to use just standard equipment to be able to make those transitions. So some of the benefits with learning to ride, if you had children that have learned to ride, you've probably already recognized this, but we know that there are significant health benefits when there's any level of physical activity. There's the opportunity for inclusion, so where kids go riding bikes together and things along those lines, they have the opportunity to participate in that with their able-bodied peers, and it gives them one more opportunity just to connect with their peers. It also has the opportunity to impact the family. So if you have a family that is accustomed to going for family bike rides and going out and doing things of that nature, when you provide a child that has a disability, autism or any other disability, the opportunity to connect with the family, it's going to have an outflow on the family dynamics there. And then it can also provide means of transportation. So I know in Turkey, commuting on a bicycle is a very popular mode of transportation, but it also provides students and children that may not be able to pass a driver's exam or acquire the skills necessary to drive a vehicle. They are able to operate and independently transport themselves on a bicycle. And then obviously the physical benefits in terms of just being able to participate in recreation and the quality of life there. So let's get right to it. Our time is limited, and so I want to really just dive right into this. And so we're going to look at just some brief tips on stopping, starting, pedaling, steering, and vision. And so just kind of give you some ideas on what we typically would see out of a child versus what a child with autism might look like. In terms of stopping, when we're looking at the smaller bicycles, like the 12-inch and 16-inch bikes, and when I call a bike by its inches, I'm talking about the size of the tires. And a lot of those smaller bikes come with what we call coaster brakes or foot brakes, right? Where the child has to engage the brake by pushing backwards. And so what you might do, if you have the ability to, is to look and investigate whether or not a handbrake could actually be modified to put on the handlebar to go to the rear tire. We seldom want to put a handbrake that goes to the front tire, just because if we stop that front tire too quickly or harshly, it has the potential to lunge the child forward. So we want to look at that handbrake to go to the rear tire. If that's not possible, one of the things that you can also do is kind of a land activity where you have the rider get onto the ground and stand on the ground and simulate the pedaling motion by walking forward, but then have them walk backwards. And so what that's going to do is it's going to have them drop that heel down and push the heel down, which is the same mechanism of movement that we look at for trying to engage that pedal brake or the foot brake. Okay, so if you can have them get on the ground and walk forward, right, and pretend like they're pedaling, and then you have them walk backwards and take that initial step backwards, it's very similar to mimicking what pedaling and engaging the coaster brake is going to look like. So starting, there's a couple of different tips here. I like to refer to the first one here in this picture as a frog, in which you have the seat adjusted so that the rider can firmly touch the ground, and I recommend that on all new riders, regardless of their level of comfortability or perception, because it gives them that confidence that if the bike starts to wobble or tip, they can get those feet down quickly. So what we want to do is we want to be able to provide them an opportunity where their feet can comfortably touch the ground, and then their hands, both hands are obviously on the handlebars, and they are just propelling themselves 3 or 4 times with both feet, and then they can then comfortably bring their feet up to the pedal. And while they're doing that, one of the things that you can do is just gently come behind them and give them momentum, because we know that speed, right, helps to balance the bicycle. And so it's a nice balancing act and delicate sometimes, but with a brand new rider that doesn't know how to self-start, the frog tends to be the simplest form to teach them, because it allows them the opportunity to keep both feet in the same motion, and then they bring both feet up, and it goes right into that pedaling pattern. The other is a kind of a push off, and so if you have access to a curb, this is my son starring in these pictures and some of these, you have one foot placed up on the curb while the other foot is on the pedal in the forward position, and they simply push off of the curb with their feet at the same time. And so again, it's encouraging the handlebars are staying forward. We're encouraging the eye gaze to look forward. And so you can see here that the pedal foot is forward, and then they would power off of the curb and push at the same time. So again, providing that rider the opportunity to push on a balanced level with both feet going forward. And so again, this is just kind of another angle looking at the one foot. And so then once you can transition from the curb, you can then allow them to transition to a conventional push start. And so we've kind of done this nice little stagger with doing both feet and getting both feet going. So one on the high curb and one on the pedal forward, to then transitioning to the ground. But you'll notice that in all of these, the feet are comfortably on the ground, and that's the key to success. And once that rider becomes more confident and competent, you can then start to creep the seat up to get them into more of a longer leg stride. But we have to remember that our first goal is to have a rider riding comfortably. So some notes on pedaling. You know, sometimes our students with autism and our kiddos with autism tend to have very sensitive hands and feet, and we see this translate a lot of times on the bicycle. And so sometimes they want to hold the handlebars with their fingertips, and they want to steer this way, and that's okay as long as they are maintaining control of the bicycle and they are comfortable. What they look like is less of my concern. So my concern number one is always going to be safety. Helmets are on from that standpoint, and then we are in a safe, controlled environment while we're practicing these things, free of cars and free of as many obstacles. And so then once we start pedaling and engaging the hands and the feet, sometimes the sensory input becomes just a lot for some of our kids. And so hands may again be used to navigate, but then their feet and their feet placement, sometimes for those of us that are used to cycling, it kind of frustrates us sometimes. And so we have to kind of check that at the door and remember what our number one goal is. That's to get our kiddo riding. So balls of the feet are going to always be the best option, right? I mean, that's where we're going to enlist the most power, but for some, that's not the best. We will sometimes see that they will invert, and if my hands are my feet, they will literally invert and ride on the side, right? And so they'll ride on the sides of their feet, or they might try to even tiptoe just to remove some of that sensory. So it becomes really important that we keep that seat low. I can't emphasize that enough. Sometimes that is the biggest secret to the success, is keeping the seat low. And while it might appear that they're crunched in there, having those feet firmly on the ground when they are not riding provides them that security. So while they're trying to explore what's going to be the most comfortable foot position, they can quickly get those feet down to protect themselves, reducing the number of falls that we will see with our students. Another question I'm often asked is about the lean. Obviously, when we are riding, we don't want to shift our hips. And so you can see in this first picture here, this rider has their hips shifted. So their hips kind of look square, but then the shoulders are way off to the side. What we want to see is everything in a nice line. And so one of the things we need to do is practice going in a straight line. But as funny as this may sound, one of the best things that we can do to help our kids better understand this is to take them to like a supermarket or a grocery store if you have the ability to, and let them push the buggy and the grocery cart, because that mimics that same steering mechanism that we need them to do. And so allow them to take wide turns through the grocery store, if you have the ability to do that. And use and think about equipment that you might have. If it's an older child and maybe you have some type of lawn equipment maybe that you can use to allow for that large turning radius. And so what that starts to do is it starts to encourage the shoulder action and the head action. And so we want to see that head going with the shoulders and looking in the direction of the turn, rather than the head looking forward and then everything else is trying to turn, but it's not going to work because they're creating a lean, right? Okay. And so then that vision becomes the next piece, and I just kind of segued into that. And so we want to keep the rider looking forward when that's the direction they're going in. But sometimes our kids with autism deceive us, because what they'll do is they'll turn their head, but they'll shift their eyes because they like to use that peripheral vision. Again, some of that's just that sensitivity. They might shift their head down and then they're looking out the top sides of their eye. So you can't use the head position all the time with our kids with autism, but ideally that head is looking forward. They're also using it then to navigate when they're turning. And so sometimes that can be a little bit trickier with our kids with autism, but ideally it's the eyes and the head are kind of in that forward position, but understand that, our kids with autism might shift their heads to kind of look for that peripheral vision. So selecting a bike, sometimes we have choice, and sometimes we just have the bike that was handed down to us. And some of the things that you can do to modify this, if you have a brand new rider that has never really sat on a bike, I would actually encourage you to take the pedals off of the bike and just allow the student just to become comfortable. This is a great opportunity to go back and work on that steering piece. Maybe set up some markers out in an open space where they can loop around, just big open space, maybe with cones if you have access to cones at your school, if you're in a school setting where the rider can navigate those cones and just work on turning and isolating that skill. But what it also does is allows them to work on that, kind of go back to the stopping with the frog push, and it allows them to do that. Sometimes you'll see kids that want to run, and that's okay. Whatever is going to take to get that momentum up and going. And then slowly they'll start to keep their feet up longer and longer and longer. And once you see them going 10, 15 feet, and they're consistently comfortable with that, and they're making beautiful turns, put those pedals back on and they're ready to go. You want to look for bikes that kind of have a shorter, what we call crank arm. That's the metal piece that attaches at the hub to the pedal. And so if you have one that is shorter, then you're gonna, the student's gonna better be able to balance on that bike. Their knees won't be coming up so high, which then changes, the center of gravity and shifts their balance along the way. High riders, so if you're looking at somebody who's maybe a little bit taller, having a 24 or a 26-inch bike where the rider can sit up nice and tall and those handlebars are raised up. So the more upward we can have them as new riders, the better position they are. So we want to kind of avoid what we refer to here in the States as BMX or trick bikes. Those typically don't make the best bikes to learn on, but at the end of the day, a bike your child is going to ride or your student is going to ride is going to be the best bike for them to learn on at the end of the day. I once worked with a kid who refused to ride our bikes because the student wanted a pink bike and we didn't have a pink bike for them to ride. So I sent one of our assistants to go to a party store, find streamers, and wrap the bike in pink streamers. And guess what they did? They climbed on the bike and they started riding. So don't underestimate the power of a bike that a child likes as really the biggest motivator for them to ride on. So at this point, if you have questions, if you're watching this, it's because we had some kind of connectivity issue and weren't able to actually connect up live. And that's unfortunate because a lot of times the best part of this conversation are the questions with unique situations that I could potentially help you with. So I would really encourage you to email me, and I will do my best to answer your questions and get back to you in a timely fashion. And I wish you well, and I hope you enjoy the remainder of the conference.